You know that moment when you realize your entire life was a lie? When the two people you loved most in the world were just waiting for you to die so they could take everything. Yeah, that was my wake-up call. Literally. My name is Rachel. I'm 32, a certified public accountant, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. A thriving consulting firm in Chicago, a husband I adored, and a sister who was my best friend. Turns out, I was just the obstacle standing between them and everything I'd built. I don't remember the accident itself. They told me later it was a head-on collision. Some kid texting while driving. My car flipped twice. I fractured my skull, broke 3 ribs, and my brain decided it needed a vacation from consciousness for about 9 days. 9 days. That's how long I was out. And when I finally started coming back, when my brain began piecing together sounds and sensations again, I wasn't quite awake yet. I was in that strange in-between place where you can hear things but you can't move, can't open your eyes, can't speak. The doctors have a term for it. I didn't care what it was called. All I cared about was what I heard. It was late. I could tell by the quiet, the way the hospital sounds had softened to distant beeps and hushed footsteps. Someone was in my room. 2 people, actually. I recognized their voices immediately. My husband, Daniel, and my sister, Lauren. I remember feeling this flood of relief. They were there. They were together. Probably exhausted from taking turns at my bedside. Probably worried sick. I wanted so badly to squeeze Daniel's hand, to let them know I was still in here, fighting my way back. Then Lauren laughed. It wasn't her normal laugh. It was low, intimate. The kind of laugh you share with someone when you're alone and you don't want anyone else to hear. God, I can't believe we're actually going to pull this off, she said. I felt Daniel's hand on mine. The same hand I'd held on our wedding day 4 years ago. The same hand that had signed our business partnership agreement when we expanded my firm. We just have to be patient a little longer, he replied. His voice was calm, almost cheerful. The doctors said if she doesn't wake up in the next 48 hours, they'll start talking about long-term care options. Long-term care options. My brain screamed at my body to move, to do something, but I was still trapped in the dark. And if she does wake up? Lauren asked. There was an edge to her voice. Not worry. Calculation. Then we adjust, Daniel said smoothly. But honestly, babe, the way her vitals have been, I don't think she's coming back from this. Babe. He called my sister babe. When she dies, Lauren said slowly, like she was testing the words out loud, we'll get married. You'll inherit her half of the firm as her spouse, and I'll inherit as her only living relative. We'll merge it all, rebrand, and finally run things the way they should have been run from the start. Exactly. Daniel squeezed my hand. It felt like ice. She was always too cautious. Too by the book, you and I, we think bigger. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip my hand away from his, but I couldn't. Do you think anyone will suspect? Lauren asked. Suspect what? Daniel's voice was amused. A tragic accident? A grieving widow and a devastated sister trying to honor her legacy? Please. Everyone already thinks we're saints for staying by her side this whole time. They talked for another 20 minutes. About the firm. About which clients they'd keep and which they'd drop. About the house. My house. The one I'd bought before I even met Daniel. About how they'd been so careful for the past year and a half. A year and a half. They'd been sleeping together for a year and a half. And I'd had no idea. I'd trusted them with everything. My business, my home, my heart, and they were just waiting for me to die. When they finally left, I didn't cry. I couldn't. But something inside me shifted. Something cold and sharp and absolutely furious settled into place where my heart used to be. I spent the rest of that night and the entire next day pretending. My vitals were improving. I knew that much from the nurses, conversations. My brain was healing. I could move my fingers now. Could flutter my eyelids if I really tried. But I didn't. I stayed perfectly still, perfectly silent, because I needed them to believe I was slipping away. I needed them to feel safe. On the second evening, when the nurse came in for her rounds, I waited until she was close. Then I opened my eyes and grabbed her wrist. She gasped, called for the doctor, and within minutes my room was flooded with people checking my pupils, asking me questions, acting like I'd just performed a miracle. I played along. Confused, weak, disoriented. I asked for Daniel and Lauren, and when they rushed in, I watched their faces carefully. Daniel looked shocked. Then, for just a fraction of a second, disappointed. Lauren hugged me, crying, telling me how scared she'd been. I felt her tears on my neck and wondered how someone could be such a convincing liar. I told them I didn't remember anything about the accident. I told them everything was foggy. I told them I just wanted to rest. And I did rest, but not the way they thought. While they went home that night, probably panicking about their ruined plans, I lay in that hospital bed and started making my own. I'm a forensic accountant. I've spent the last decade learning how to find hidden money, trace assets, and uncover financial fraud. I've testified in court. I've taken down executives who thought they were untouchable. Daniel and Lauren had no idea what they'd just unleashed. Over the next 3 days, I played the part of the fragile survivor. I smiled weakly at the doctors. I thanked the nurses. I let Daniel hold my hand and Lauren fluff my pillows. And the whole time I was planning. The moment I was discharged, I told them I needed time to recover at home, alone, just for a few days to process everything. They protested, of course, but I insisted. I needed space. I needed quiet. What I really needed was access to my files. The second they left my house, I got to work. I pulled every financial record I had. Business accounts, personal accounts, joint accounts with Daniel, the shared investment portfolio, the property deeds, every contract, every signature, every transaction from the past 2 years, and I found exactly what I was looking for. Daniel had been siphoning money from the firm, not huge amounts, nothing that would trigger an immediate alarm, but steady transfers to an offshore account, $50,000 here, $30,000 there. Over 18 months, he'd moved nearly $400,000. My money, and Lauren, sweet, loving Lauren, who I'd hired as the firm's marketing director because she said she wanted to build something together. She'd been falsifying vendor invoices, creating fake contracts with non-existent companies, funneling payments into accounts she controlled. Another $200,000 are easy. They'd been robbing me blind while planning my funeral. I sat back in my office chair and laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was almost impressive how stupid they thought I was. I spent the next 48 hours preparing. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I just worked. I documented everything. I created a secure backup of every file, every email, every bank statement. I contacted my attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd helped me set up the firm's legal structure. I told her I needed to make some changes to my estate planning. Urgently. She didn't ask questions. I also called my accountant, Marcus, someone I'd known since grad school and trusted implicitly. I told him I needed a full audit of the business, completely confidential. He said he'd start immediately. Then I called my doctor and asked her to document my cognitive function. I needed it on record that I was fully competent, fully aware, and making decisions of sound mind. Because I was about to burn their lives to the ground, and I wanted to make sure no one could claim I was acting irrationally due to head trauma. On the 5th day after I came home, Daniel showed up with flowers and takeout. He kissed my forehead and asked how I was feeling. I told him I was getting stronger every day. He smiled. "That's my girl." I smiled back. And I thought, you have no idea what's coming. The hardest part wasn't the planning. It wasn't gathering evidence or documenting their theft. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal while I dismantled their entire world piece by piece. Daniel started staying over more often. He'd bring groceries, cook dinner, play the devoted husband. He'd hold me at night and whisper that he was so grateful I'd survived, that he didn't know what he would have done without me. I'd lie there in the dark, feeling his arms around me, and think about every lie he'd ever told. Every time he'd said he was working late when he was probably with Lauren. Every time he'd kissed me goodbye in the morning, and then called my sister the second he got in his car. Lauren came by too. She'd bring magazines and those expensive lattes I liked. She'd sit on the edge of my bed and talk about the firm, about how everyone missed me, about how she and Daniel had been holding down the fort and while I recovered. "We make a good team," she said once, smiling. "Daniel and I, we've been handling everything so you don't have to worry." I bet you have, I thought. Out loud, I just thanked her and said I didn't know what I'd do without her. She squeezed my hand. That's what family is for. Family. The word tasted like poison. Marcus finished the audit in 8 days. When he sent me the report, I had to read it 3 times because the numbers were almost too brazen to believe. Daniel hadn't just been stealing. He'd been preparing to take over. He'd quietly repositioned himself on several key client accounts, inserting clauses that would automatically transfer servicing rights to him in the event of my incapacitation or death. He'd even drafted a contingency partnership agreement that I'd supposedly signed during a business trip last year, except I'd never signed it. The signature was forged. Lauren's scheme was just as calculated. She'd created an entire network of shell companies, phantom vendors that existed only on paper. The invoices looked legitimate, the services sounded real, but every single payment had gone into accounts she controlled. She'd been doing it for over a year, hiding it behind legitimate marketing expenses. Together, they'd stolen nearly $650,000 from my company. My company. The one I'd built from nothing. The one I'd sacrificed weekends and holidays and countless sleepless nights to create. I sat at my desk, staring at the audit report, and felt something settle in my chest. Not rage anymore. Something colder. Clearer. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to take everything I'd built and pretend I'd never existed, so I was going to do the same to them. I started with the legal framework. Patricia helped me restructure everything. We quietly amended the business operating agreement, removing Daniel as a beneficiary and creating an ironclad succession plan that explicitly excluded family members with conflicts of interest. We updated my will, my power of attorney, everything. Then I transferred ownership of the house into a trust. My trust, one that Daniel had no access to and no claim on, regardless of marital status. I moved money. Not all at once. That would have been obvious. But I systematically shifted assets out of joint accounts and into secure holdings. I liquidated our shared investment portfolio and reinvested it in my name only. I even sold my car, the one that had been totaled in the accident, and bought a new one outright with funds Daniel couldn't touch. Every single move was legal, documented, justified. I was a woman recovering from a traumatic brain injury, getting her affairs in order. Who could argue with that? While I was restructuring my entire financial life, Marcus was building a case. He'd brought in a forensic specialist, someone who worked with the FBI on white-collar crime. They traced every fraudulent transaction, documented every forged signature, mapped out the entire network of theft. It was beautiful, meticulous, absolutely damning. Then I made the call I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. I contacted the IRS. People don't understand how serious the IRS is until they've seen them work. They don't raid your house with guns and bulletproof vests like you see in cop shows. They do something worse. They quietly, methodically dismantle your entire financial existence while you're completely powerless to stop it. I submitted a detailed whistleblower report, complete with every piece of evidence Marcus and I had compiled. Fraudulent invoices, forged documents, offshore accounts, tax evasion, wire fraud. The IRS agent I spoke with was almost cheerful. "Ma'am, this is extremely thorough. We'll be opening an investigation immediately." "How long does that usually take?" I asked. "For something this clear-cut, we could have preliminary findings in 4 to 6 weeks. Full investigation might take a few months, but honestly, with documentation like this, we'll probably move faster." 4 to 6 weeks. I could wait 4 to 6 weeks. In the meantime, I played my part. I went back to the office for slight duties, smiling at everyone, accepting their well wishes and concern. I sat in on meetings where Daniel presented strategies he'd developed, with my input, biting my tongue while he took credit for my ideas. Lauren organized a welcome back lunch for me. The whole team was there. She gave a speech about resilience and family and how proud she was of me. I watched her perform, watched everyone applaud, and thought about how much she was going to hate me in about 3 weeks. Daniel pulled me aside after the lunch. "You seem different," he said, studying my face. My heart skipped. Different how? I don't know. Quieter, maybe. More distant. He touched my cheek. "Are you okay? Is it the accident? Are you having headaches or—" "I'm fine," I interrupted, forcing a smile. "I'm just tired. Recovery is harder than I expected." He kissed my forehead. "Take all the time you need, baby. I'm here for you." "Sure you are," I thought. "Right up until I'm dead and you're living in my house with my sister." That night, I made another call. This one to an investigator I'd worked with on a previous case. A former police detective named Mike who now ran a private investigation firm. "I need surveillance," I told him. "My husband and my sister. I need to know everywhere they go, everyone they meet, everything they do." "You think they're having an affair?" he asked. I know they're having an affair, I said. I need documentation, photos, videos, timestamps, everything that would hold up in court. Court? Divorce court, specifically. There was a pause. Then Mike said, "How long do you want me on them?" 2 weeks. That should be enough. It was more than enough. Mike's report started coming in after 3 days. Daniel and Lauren weren't even being careful anymore. They met at hotels during lunch breaks. They went to her apartment when they thought I was at physical therapy appointments. They texted constantly, and Mike had managed to pull the records through completely legal channels involving their company phones. The messages were stomach-turning. Not just because of the affair, but because of how they talked about me. Daniel. Sometimes I forget she's still alive, lol. Lauren. 2 more months and we can stop pretending. Daniel. Worth it though. The firm's worth at least $3 million. Lauren. And the house. And the accounts. God, we're going to be so rich. Daniel. We are rich. We just have to wait for her to finish dying. I printed every single message. I added them to the file that was growing thicker by the day. Evidence, cold, hard, undeniable evidence. I also filed for divorce. Quietly, no drama, no announcement. I just had Patricia submit the paperwork citing irreconcilable differences. Daniel would be served eventually, but I timed it carefully. I wanted everything else in place first. 3 weeks after I'd contacted the IRS, I got the call. Mrs. Richardson, this is Agent Torres. We've completed the preliminary phase of our investigation, and I wanted to inform you that we'll be moving forward with formal charges against both Daniel Richardson and Lauren Hayes for tax fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. My hands were shaking. Both of them. Yes, ma'am. The evidence you provided was extremely comprehensive. We'll be executing search warrants and conducting interviews this week. I wanted to give you advance notice since you're the whistleblower and the primary victim. What happens next? They'll be arrested, charged. We'll seize assets related to the fraud. Given the amounts involved and the deliberate nature of the scheme, we're expecting this to result in federal charges, which means potential prison time. Prison time? I closed my eyes. Thank you, Agent Torres. No, ma'am. Thank you. People like you, willing to come forward even against family. That's how we catch criminals. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time. The sun was setting outside my window, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and gold. I thought about Daniel, about the man I'd married, or the man I thought I'd married. I thought about Lauren, my baby sister, who I'd protected and supported and loved unconditionally. And I thought about how they'd looked at me in that hospital room, how they'd stood over my unconscious body and planned their future like I was already dead. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. The arrests happened on a Thursday morning. I made sure I wasn't at the office. I'd taken the day off, told everyone I had a follow-up appointment with my neurologist. Instead, I was at Patricia's office, watching the clock. My phone buzzed at 9:47 a.m. It was Marcus. Marcus. Federal agents just walked into the building. They're asking for Daniel and Lauren. I didn't respond. I just waited. 10 minutes later, another text. Marcus. They're taking them out in handcuffs. The whole office is in shock. What the hell is happening? Me. Tax fraud investigation. It's been ongoing. I'll explain everything later. I turned off my phone after that. Patricia looked at me across her desk. How do you feel? Ask me tomorrow, I said, but I already knew the answer. I felt like I'd just taken my life back. The news spread like wildfire. By noon, my phone was exploding with messages from employees, clients, even people I hadn't talked to in years. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, if the rumors were true, if I was okay. I ignored all of it. I spent that Thursday afternoon in Patricia's conference room, going through the final details of what would happen next. The divorce papers had been served to Daniel that morning, right before the federal agents arrived. Perfect timing, really. He was too busy being arrested to even process that his marriage was over. The criminal charges will take precedence, Patricia explained. The divorce will proceed in parallel, but honestly, Rachel, with the evidence of fraud and the fact that he was actively trying to steal from you, this should be straightforward. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, but given the circumstances, you'll retain virtually everything. What about the firm? I asked. The firm is yours. It was established before the marriage, and you can prove he was embezzling. His ownership stake, such as it was, is forfeit. The federal government will likely seize whatever assets he has to cover restitution, but your business is protected. And Lauren? Patricia's expression hardened. She's facing more serious charges, actually. As an employee who defrauded the company, and given the amounts involved and the duration of the scheme, she's looking at significant prison time. The prosecutor mentioned anywhere from 5 to 8 years, possibly more if they can prove additional charges. 8 years. My sister was going to prison for 8 years. I waited for the guilt to hit me. For the grief, the regret, the sisterly instinct to protect her despite everything. It never came. I turned my phone back on that evening. The messages had multiplied. Missed calls from my parents, who I hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years after a falling out over money I'd loaned them that they never paid back. Voicemails from Daniel's mother, hysterical and confused. Texts from coworkers expressing shock and offering support. And one message from Lauren. Lauren, how could you do this to me? I stared at that message for a full minute. The audacity of it. The sheer breathtaking audacity. I didn't respond. I blocked her number and deleted the message. Then I called my parents. My mother answered on the first ring. Rachel. Oh my God, Rachel, what is happening? Lauren just called from jail. She's hysterical. She says you had her arrested. She says, everything she told you is probably true. I interrupted calmly. She and Daniel were stealing from my company. They've been having an affair. They were waiting for me to die so they could take everything I'd built. The IRS arrested them this morning. Silence. Then my father's voice, loud enough that I could tell he'd grabbed the phone. You had your own sister arrested? Your husband? Jesus Christ. Rachel, what kind of person are you? The kind who doesn't appreciate being robbed, I said. The kind who doesn't appreciate family members standing over her hospital bed planning her funeral while she's still breathing. Lauren said you were confused. My mother cut in, clearly on speaker now. She said the head injury affected your memory, that you're not thinking clearly. I have medical documentation proving I'm completely competent, I said. I have an independent forensic audit showing over $600,000 in theft. I have text messages where they explicitly discussed waiting for me to die. Would you like me to send you copies? More silence. They made mistakes, my father said finally. People make mistakes, Rachel. You don't destroy your family over mistakes. I laughed. Actually laughed. They didn't make mistakes, Dad. They made choices. Calculated, deliberate choices over the course of 18 months. They chose to betray me. They chose to steal from me. They chose to plan a future that required me to be dead. Those aren't mistakes. That's malice. So you're just going to let your sister go to prison? My mother asked, her voice breaking. I let your husband's life be ruined. I'm not letting anything happen, I said. They did this to themselves. I'm just making sure they face consequences, something you two never taught Lauren, apparently. Don't you dare, my father started. I'm done, I interrupted. But I'm done being the responsible one, the successful one, the one who bails everyone out and gets nothing but betrayal in return. Lauren is an adult who committed federal crimes. Daniel is an adult who committed federal crimes. They're going to face adult consequences. If you want to support them, that's your choice. But don't ever contact me again expecting me to fix this or feel guilty about it. I hung up before they could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or regret, from relief, from the absolute liberation of finally saying what I'd needed to say for years. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch in the house that was now entirely, legally, irrevocably mine. And I started planning my exit. The media picked up the story by Friday afternoon. Local business owner's husband and sister arrested in elaborate fraud scheme. The headlines were almost gleeful in their scandal. I declined all interview requests. At the office, I called an all-hands meeting. Everyone filed into the conference room looking nervous, whispering to each other. I could only imagine what they'd been saying all day. I stood at the head of the table and got straight to the point. By now, you've all heard that Daniel Richardson and Lauren Hayes were arrested yesterday on federal fraud charges. What you may not know is that they'd been systematically stealing from this company for over a year. They created false invoices, falsified records, and embezzled more than $600,000. The room was dead silent. I discovered this after my accident. I continued. I conducted a private investigation, hired forensic accountants, and presented evidence to federal authorities. The investigation confirmed everything. They will both face trial, and they will both likely go to prison. Someone in the back started to raise a hand, but I held up mine. I want to be very clear about something. This company is not defined by their actions. We are not defined by their crimes. This firm was built on integrity, expertise, and trust. Those values haven't changed. I haven't changed. We will continue to serve our clients with the same dedication we always have, but we will do it with a zero-tolerance policy for fraud, theft, or any form of dishonesty. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. If anyone here feels uncomfortable continuing to work under these circumstances, I understand. You can speak with HR about transitioning out, but if you stay, I need you to understand that we're moving forward. Not dwelling on the past, not making excuses, moving forward. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes. People asked questions. I answered them honestly. By the end, I could see the shift in their faces. The fear was still there, but so was something else. Respect, maybe, or recognition that I wasn't going to let this destroy what we'd built. Over the next 2 weeks, the pieces continued to fall into place. Daniel tried to contact me through his lawyer, asking to talk, to explain. I refused. There was nothing he could say that would change anything. Patricia handled all communication through legal channels. Lauren wrote me a letter from jail. It was 6 pages of justifications, excuses, and eventually, desperate pleading. She said she'd made a mistake, that Daniel had manipulated her, that she'd been weak and stupid, but she still loved me. She was still my sister. Didn't that count for something? I read it once, then I shredded it. The IRS investigation expanded. They'd found even more irregularities, not just in my business, but in Daniel's personal accounts. He'd been evading taxes for years, hiding income, falsifying deductions. The charges kept mounting. Mike, my investigator, delivered his final report. It included hundreds of photos, dozens of hours of video surveillance, and a complete timeline of the affair. Daniel and Lauren hadn't just been planning to steal my company, they'd been planning their wedding. Mike had found receipts for a venue deposit, a caterer consultation, even a jeweler's invoice for an engagement ring. They'd been planning their future on my grave. I added it all to the divorce filing. Patricia said the judge would probably be appalled. I said good. The preliminary hearings happened in early October. I attended Daniel's. I wanted to see his face when the prosecutor laid out the evidence. He looked terrible. Thinner, pale. His expensive suit looked like it had been slept in. When they brought him into the courtroom in handcuffs, his eyes scanned the gallery until they found me. I met his gaze and didn't look away. He mouthed something. I think it was please. I didn't react. I just watched as the prosecutor presented the case. Embezzlement, tax fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, the amounts, the timeline, the offshore accounts, the forged signatures. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue that his client had made errors in judgment and was willing to cooperate fully with authorities. The judge looked unimpressed. Bail was set at $500,000. Daniel couldn't make bail. His accounts had been frozen. His parents didn't have that kind of money. He'd be staying in custody until trial. I left before the hearing ended. I had better things to do than watch him squirm. Lauren's hearing was 2 days later. I didn't attend that one. I didn't need to. Patricia went on my behalf and reported back that Lauren had cried through the entire proceeding, that her public defender had argued for leniency based on her age and lack of prior criminal history, and that the judge had denied bail entirely based on flight risk. She kept asking if you were there, Patricia said. Her lawyer mentioned it twice. I think she wanted to see you. Good, I said. I hope she keeps wondering. While they sat in jail waiting for trial, I started preparing for the next phase of my life. The phase that didn't include either of them. The phase where I took everything I'd learned and everything I'd lost and turned it into something new. I started by liquidating assets. Not the firm, I wasn't ready to give that up yet, but other things. The investment properties Daniel and I had purchased together, the vacation condo in Florida, the boat he'd insisted we buy that I'd never wanted. I sold it all, quietly, efficiently, at fair market value. The divorce wasn't finalized yet, but with Daniel in custody and facing decades in prison, his lawyer wasn't in a position to argue about asset distribution. Everything sold, and every dollar went into accounts only I could access. Then I sold the house, the beautiful 3-story brownstone in Lincoln Park that I'd bought with my own money before I'd even met Daniel. The house where I'd built my life. The house where I'd woken up next to a man who wanted me dead. I sold it to the first cash buyer I could find, took a slight loss to expedite the sale. and didn't look back. I put most of my furniture in storage and moved into a corporate apartment downtown. Temporary, anonymous. A place where I could think without being haunted by memories of a life that had never been real. And then I started making calls. International calls. I'd always wanted to expand globally. It was something Daniel had argued against, saying it was too risky, too expensive, too complicated. Now I understood why. He hadn't wanted me to have options. He'd wanted me tied to Chicago, to the firm, to him. Well, Daniel was in jail now, and I had options. I researched markets. London, Singapore, Dubai, Toronto, cities where American businesses could establish operations, where my expertise would be valued, where I could rebuild without the weight of scandal and betrayal following me. I settled on London. The UK had a massive demand for forensic accountants, especially ones with experience in American financial regulations. The time zone worked well for keeping some American clients while building a European base. And honestly, I just liked the idea of an ocean between me and everything that had happened. I contacted a business immigration attorney. I started the process of establishing a UK subsidiary of my firm. I researched office spaces in Canary Wharf and apartments in South Kensington, and I told absolutely no one except Patricia and Marcus. The divorce was finalized in November. Daniel didn't contest anything. He couldn't. His lawyer was too busy trying to keep him from dying in prison. I got everything. The remaining assets, the firm, full ownership of everything we'd ever purchased together. The judge had looked at the evidence of the affair, the fraud, the theft, and basically said Daniel was lucky I wasn't suing him for more. I walked out of that courthouse with signed papers and a strange sense of emptiness, not sadness, just the hollow feeling of closing a chapter that should have ended so differently. That night, I went to dinner by myself at an expensive restaurant downtown. I ordered champagne and the most expensive item on the menu. I sat alone at a table for one and toasted myself. To survival, I whispered. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. Marcus. The buyout offer came through. Clean, fair price, all terms acceptable. You sure about this? I'd been quietly looking for a buyer for the firm. Not because it was failing. It was thriving, actually. But because I didn't want it anymore. It was tainted now. Every office, every file, every client meeting reminded me of what Daniel and Lauren had tried to take. I wanted to start fresh. Completely fresh. Me. I'm sure, accept the offer. Marcus, closing in 30 days. Me. Perfect. I finished my dinner, paid the check with a credit card that had only my name on it, and went back to my empty apartment. I had 30 days to wrap up my old life and start my new one. The trials were scheduled for January. Both Daniel and Lauren had been offered plea deals. Daniel's lawyer was advising him to take it. 15 years in federal prison in exchange for cooperation and restitution. Lauren's deal was slightly better. 8 years. Possibility of parole after 5. I heard all this through Patricia. I didn't care whether they took the deals or went to trial. Either way, they'd be out of my life for a very long time. What I did care about was making sure they understood what they'd lost. I had Patricia send them both letters. Formal letters. Delivered through their attorneys. The letters outlined everything I'd sold. Every asset I'd liquidated. Every dollar I'd moved. The house, sold. The cars, sold. The investment properties, sold. The firm, sold. And then I included one final paragraph. The same in both letters. You wanted my life. You wanted my business, my home, my money. You were willing to wait for me to die to take it all. Instead, I've taken it first. I've sold everything you coveted, liquidated every asset you planned to steal, and removed myself from your reach entirely. By the time you read this, I will have left the country. You will never know where I am. You will never benefit from anything I've built. You spent 18 months planning my funeral. I hope prison gives you plenty of time to plan your own futures. Patricia called me after the letters were delivered. Daniel's lawyer said he broke down crying when he read it. She told me. Lauren apparently ripped hers up and then asked for another copy so she could read it again. Good, I said. Rachel, Patricia said carefully, I have to ask, are you okay? Really okay? I thought about that question. Was I okay? I'd lost my husband, my sister, my parents, and the company I'd spent a decade building. I'd been betrayed by the people I loved most. I'd discovered that my entire marriage had been a lie and my sister had been robbing me blind while smiling to my face. But I'd survived. I'd fought back. I'd won. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm free." I left Chicago on December 15th. The firm sale had closed. Everything I owned fit into 4 suitcases and 3 boxes of storage. I'd said goodbye to Marcus, to Patricia, to the handful of friends who'd stood by me through everything. I'd donated most of my furniture to charity. I'd cleared out my office, packed up the few personal items that mattered, and walked out of the building one last time. No fanfare, no dramatic goodbye speech. I just locked the door behind me and left. At the airport, I sat in the lounge waiting for my flight to London and scrolled through my phone one last time. Messages from people who didn't know I was leaving, emails about a life I was abandoning, social media posts from a world I was walking away from. I deleted my accounts, all of them, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Every digital footprint that connected me to Rachel Richardson, Chicago accountant, betrayed wife, ruined sister. When I landed in London, I'd be someone else. Not a new identity, exactly. Just a new version of myself. One without the weight of their betrayal. One who'd learned that trust is earned, not given. One who'd survived the worst thing she could imagine and came out stronger. My flight was called. I picked up my carry-on and walked toward the gate. I didn't look back. London was cold in December, but I didn't mind. I'd rented a furnished flat in Marylebone. A quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and corner cafes where nobody knew my name or my story. The flat was small, minimalist, the kind of place that felt temporary, even though I'd signed a year lease. I liked that. I wasn't ready for permanent yet. The first week was disorienting. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, confused about where I was, reaching for a phone that no longer held the same contacts, the same life. I'd walk through the streets during the day, anonymous in a city of 9 million people, and feel both terrified and liberated by that anonymity. I opened a UK bank account. I registered my new business entity. I started reaching out to contacts I'd made over the years at international conferences, people who didn't know about Daniel or Lauren or any of it. People who only knew me as Rachel, the sharp forensic accountant from Chicago, with an impressive track record. The responses were encouraging. A financial consulting firm in the city wanted to discuss partnership opportunities. A law firm specializing in international fraud cases needed expert witnesses. A startup accelerator was looking for someone to handle financial due diligence. I took meetings. I rebuilt my professional network from scratch. I worked 14-hour days not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because staying busy meant not thinking about what I'd left behind. But at night, in that quiet flat, the thoughts always came anyway. I found out about the plea deals in January. Patricia called me on a Tuesday morning, London time. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Daniel took the deal. 15 years, federal prison, eligible for parole after 12 if he maintains good behavior. He also agreed to full restitution, though realistically, he has nothing left to give you. The government seized what little he had. And Lauren? Took her deal too. 8 years. She'll likely serve 6. Her lawyer tried to argue for minimum security based on her being a first-time offender, but the prosecutor pushed back hard. She'll be in a low to medium facility. 6 to 8 years. It seems simultaneously too long and not long enough. How did they look? I asked, then immediately regretted the question. I didn't actually want to know, except I did. Patricia paused. Broken. Daniel especially. He's apparently been in protective custody because some of his fellow inmates found out he'd tried to kill his wife. He didn't try to kill me. I interrupted. Semantics. Rachel. He stood over your hospital bed and discussed your death like it was a business transaction. In prison, that's close enough. Lauren's having a rough time too. I heard she's been in the infirmary twice. Panic attacks, apparently. I should have felt something. Satisfaction, maybe, or vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. Thank you for letting me know, I said. There's one more thing. Patricia's voice shifted. Your parents tried to contact me. They wanted your new address. I told them I didn't have it. Good. Rachel, I have to ask, do you ever think about reaching out, not to Daniel or Lauren, but to your parents? They're still your... They chose... I interrupted again. When Lauren called them from jail, when she fed them her version of events, they chose to believe her over me. They didn't even ask for my side. They just attacked me for near destroying the family. So no, Patricia, I don't think about reaching out. They made their choice. I made mine. After we hung up, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring out the window at the London drizzle. My parents had always favored Lauren, the baby, the charming one, the one who could do no wrong. I'd been the responsible one, the one who didn't need as much attention, the one who was supposed to understand and forgive and keep the peace. I was done being that person. February brought the first real signs that my new life was taking shape. I signed a contract with a major London law firm to serve as their expert witness on a massive international fraud case. The retainer alone was more than I'd made in 6 months back in Chicago. I hired a small team, a paralegal named Sophie who was brilliant and organized, a junior accountant named Raj who'd graduated top of his class from LSE. We rented office space in Canary Wharf, nothing fancy, just enough room for the three of us and space to grow. I named the company Meridian Forensic Consulting. No reference to my past, no connection to Chicago, a clean slate. The work was challenging in all the right ways. International tax law, cross-border fraud investigations, cases that spanned multiple continents and legal jurisdictions. I was building something again, but this time it was mine alone. No partners who could betray me. No family members who could steal from me. Just me and people I paid to do a job. Sophie asked me once, over coffee in the office kitchen, why I'd left America. I'd prepared for this question. I told her I'd gone through a difficult divorce and wanted a fresh start. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. She nodded sympathetically and never asked again. I liked that about the British. They respected privacy in a way Americans never did. In March, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should know." I almost deleted it. I got plenty of spam. But something made me open it. Rachel, you don't know me, but I used to work at your firm in Chicago. I was in accounting. I left about a year before everything happened with Daniel and Lauren. I wanted to reach out because I think you should know that you weren't the only one. After the arrests made the news, 2 other women came forward. Both said they'd had affairs with Daniel. One was a client, one was a vendor rep. Both said he told them he was going to leave you, that he just needed to wait for the right time. I don't know if this makes things better or worse for you, but I thought you deserved to know that Lauren wasn't special. You weren't replaced by your sister because she was better or more lovable or whatever. You were betrayed by 2 fundamentally broken people who would have betrayed anyone. I hope you're doing okay, wherever you are. Anonymous. I read the email 3 times, 2 other women. Of course there were. Daniel had always been charming. I'd fallen for it myself. Why wouldn't others? I should have felt angrier, more betrayed. Instead, I felt validated. This wasn't about me. It had never been about me. Daniel was simply a man who took what he wanted and discarded what he didn't need. Lauren was a woman who'd always been jealous of what I had and finally saw a chance to take it. I was just collateral damage in their narcissistic little love story. I closed the email and went back to work. April brought an unexpected visitor. I was in the office late, reviewing documents for the fraud case, when Sophie knocked on my door. "Rachel, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your mother." My blood went cold. "Tell her I'm not available." I did. She's been waiting in the lobby for 2 hours. Security says she won't leave until she talks to you. I closed my eyes and counted to 10, then 20. Then I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked to the lobby. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. Older. She was sitting in one of the modern chairs near the window, clutching her purse in her lap like a life preserver. When she saw me, she stood up so fast she nearly stumbled. "Rachel. Oh my God, Rachel." I didn't move closer. "How did you find me?" "I hired someone, an investigator. It took months, but..." "You hired an investigator." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You spent money tracking me down after I explicitly cut contact. Did it occur to you that maybe I didn't want to be found?" "Rachel, please, I need to talk to you. Your father, I don't care," I said flatly. "Whatever you flew across the Atlantic to say, I don't care. You chose Lauren. You chose to believe her lies over my evidence. You called me cruel for pressing charges against people who stole from me and wished me dead. So no, Mom, we don't have anything to talk about." My mother's face crumpled. "She's my daughter too, Rachel. I couldn't just abandon her." "But you could abandon me. It wasn't a question. That's not, you're successful, you're strong, you were fine. I was in a coma." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "I woke up to my husband and sister planning my funeral. I was hospitalized, traumatized, and instead of asking if I was okay, you defended the people who betrayed me. So don't stand there and tell me I was fine." She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "I didn't know. Lauren said you were confused, that the accident had affected your judgment. And you believed her, without question, without even calling me to hear my side." I shook my head. "That tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in this family. Please, Rachel, your father has cancer, pancreatic, stage 4. He wants to see you before—" "No." The word hung in the air between us. "He's dying," she whispered. "Then he'll die without me." I felt nothing as I said it. No guilt, no regret, just a cold, clear certainty. He had a choice. When this all happened, when Lauren called from jail and fed you her version of events, he had a choice. He could have called me. He could have asked for the truth. Instead, he called me heartless for refusing to bail her out. He said I'd destroyed the family. Those were his choices. Mom, now I'm making mine. Rachel, please. I want you to leave. I gestured toward the elevator. I want you to go back to Chicago, back to Dad, back to whatever remains of your relationship with Lauren when she gets out of prison. I want you to live your life without me in it, because that's what you chose. I made a mistake. She was sobbing now. We both did. We should have listened to you. We should have believed you. I know that now. Lauren wrote me from prison. She admitted everything. She said terrible things about what they'd planned. I don't care what Lauren admitted. My voice was ice. I don't care that you believe me now. You should have believed me then. When it mattered, when I needed you. I turned to walk away. She grabbed my arm. Rachel, please, I'm begging you. Don't let your father die thinking you hate him. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her face. I don't hate him, Mom. I don't hate you either. I just don't want you in my life anymore. There's a difference. I pulled my arm free and walked back to my office. I heard her calling my name. Heard Sophie trying to calm her down. Heard the elevator ding as security presumably escorted her out. I sat at my desk and went back to work. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I'd meant every word I'd said. Update 1. The months blurred together after that. Spring turned to summer. My business grew. We hired 2 more people. We moved to a bigger office. I bought a flat in South Kensington, a real home this time, with high ceilings and original Victorian details, and a view of the park. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious. A barrister I met at a work function. A consultant from New York who was in London for 6 months. Nice men, decent men, men who didn't trigger any alarm bells or red flags. But I never let anyone get too close. Trust, I'd learned, was a luxury I could no longer afford. In August, I got a notification from Patricia. Daniel had been attacked in prison. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that he'd been hospitalized for a week. Apparently, word had gotten around about what he'd done, and some of the inmates had decided to deliver their own form of justice. I felt nothing when I read the email. Not satisfaction, not concern, just a vague acknowledgement that actions have consequences. Lauren, meanwhile, was apparently a model prisoner. She'd enrolled in classes, joined a book club, was working in the prison library. Patricia said her lawyer was already preparing a case for early parole based on good behavior. I deleted that email without responding. In September, my father died. My mother sent me a message through Patricia, asking if I'd attend the funeral. I didn't respond. I didn't send flowers. I didn't acknowledge it in any way. Sophie found me that afternoon standing at my office window, staring out at the London skyline. "You all right?" she asked gently. "My father died," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. Factual. Distant. "Oh, Rachel, I'm so sorry. Do you need to—" "I don't need anything." I turned to face her. "Thank you, though." She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Let me know if that changes." It didn't. Update 2. October marked 1 year since I'd left Chicago. I celebrated alone in my flat with a bottle of expensive wine and a sense of quiet accomplishment. I'd rebuilt my career in a new country. I'd created a successful business. I'd proven that I could survive the worst betrayal imaginable and come out stronger. That same week, I got a letter. It had been forwarded through 3 different addresses before reaching me, but I recognized the handwriting on the envelope immediately. Lauren. I stared at it for a full day before opening it. Part of me wanted to burn it unread, but curiosity won out. Rachel, I know you probably won't read this. I know you hate me. I know I deserve it, but I need to try. I've had a lot of time to think in here about what I did, about who I was, about the person I became when I decided that taking from you was easier than building something myself. I was jealous of you my whole life. You were smarter, more successful, more disciplined. Mom and Dad never said it, but I knew they were proud of you in ways they never were of me. I was the screw-up, the one who needed help, the one who couldn't get her life together. When Daniel approached me, when he started flirting and then more than flirting, it felt like finally, I had something you didn't. Someone wanted me instead of you. And I was so pathetic, so desperate for that feeling, that I convinced myself it was love instead of what it really was. Two terrible people using each other to justify doing terrible things. I told myself you wouldn't miss the money, that you had plenty, that you were so successful, so established, you wouldn't even notice. I told myself that when you died, and God, Rachel, I actually let myself think about you dying like it was inevitable, like it was already decided. I'd use my half to finally make something of myself. I'd prove I was just as good as you. But I wasn't taking from your success. I was taking from your life, from years of work and sacrifice and discipline that I never had. I was stealing your security and telling myself it was fair because life had been unfair to me. I was wrong about everything. About you, about Daniel, about myself. Daniel and I don't talk anymore. I requested a transfer to a different facility after I found out he'd been telling other inmates that the whole thing was my idea, that he'd been manipulated by me. Even now, even in here, he's still lying, still trying to make himself the victim. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to write back or visit or acknowledge this letter at all. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did. I understand what I took from you, and I'm sorry. Even if you never believe me, even if you never think about me again, I needed to say it. I hope you're happy, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I hope you built something new and beautiful. You deserve that. I'm sorry, Rachel, for everything. Lauren. I read the letter twice, then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and filed it away in a drawer. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. Update 3. By the end of the year, Meridian Forensic Consulting had grown to 12 employees. We'd handled cases in 7 countries. I'd been quoted in the Financial Times and invited to speak at a conference in Geneva. I'd built something substantial, something real, something entirely mine. On New Year's Eve, I went to a party at a colleague's flat in Notting Hill. I almost didn't go. I'd never been big on parties, and the thought of making small talk with strangers felt exhausting. But Sophie had insisted, and I'd learned that sometimes saying yes to things was how you built a new life. I was standing on the balcony, watching fireworks explode over the Thames, when a man about my age joined me. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You looked like you could use a refill," he said, offering me one. I took it. That obvious. "You have the look of someone who's thinking too hard at a party." He smiled. "I'm James." Rachel. We talked for an hour. He was a solicitor, recently divorced, new to London from Manchester. He was funny and self-deprecating and didn't ask too many personal questions. When the party started winding down, he asked if he could call me sometime. I surprised myself by saying yes. Update 4. In February, 2 years after I'd left Chicago, Patricia called with news I'd been half expecting. Lauren's parole hearing is next month. Her lawyer thinks she has a good chance. She's been a model prisoner, completed multiple programs. The warden wrote a letter of recommendation. "Okay," I said. "She's asking if you'd be willing to write a letter, not supporting her release necessarily, but acknowledging that, I don't know, that you're not actively opposed to it." I thought about Lauren's letter, about the apology I'd never acknowledged, about the years she'd spent in prison thinking about what she'd done. "No," I said finally. "I'm not going to help her get out early, but I'm not going to fight it either. If the parole board thinks she's rehabilitated, that's their decision. I'm not part of her life anymore. I don't get a vote." "Fair enough," Patricia said. "And Daniel? He's eligible for parole in another 10 years. If he reaches out..." "He won't," I interrupted. "And if he does, you know what to do." After we hung up, I realized I felt lighter. Not because Lauren might get out of prison early, but because I genuinely didn't care anymore. She wasn't my sister. Daniel wasn't my husband. They were just 2 people who'd made terrible choices and were living with the consequences. and I was living with mine. James and I had been dating for 4 months when he told me he loved me. We were having dinner at my flat, something casual and easy, when he just said it, not dramatically, not as part of some grand gesture. Just a simple statement of fact. I love you, Rachel. I put down my fork. You don't know me well enough to love me. Maybe, he smiled. Or maybe I know exactly who you are, and I love that person. I'm damaged, I said bluntly. My ex-husband tried to steal everything from me and waited for me to die so he could marry my sister. I have trust issues that would require a team of therapists. I don't talk about my past. I barely talk to my family, and I'm not sure I'm capable of the kind of vulnerability that love requires. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Damaged isn't the same as broken. You survived something terrible. You rebuilt your entire life. You're successful and kind and brilliant. And yeah, you're guarded. You should be. But that doesn't mean you're incapable of love. It just means you're careful about who you give it to." I felt something crack in my chest, something that had been frozen solid for 2 years. "I'm not ready to say it back," I whispered. "That's okay," he said. I can wait. Final update. It's been 3 years since I woke up in that hospital room. 3 years since I heard the 2 people I loved most planning my funeral. 3 years since I decided that surviving meant more than just staying alive. Lauren got out of prison 6 months ago. She's living in a halfway house in Chicago, working at a nonprofit doing bookkeeping. She sent me one email through Patricia, letting me know she was out, that she was trying to do better, that she understood if I never wanted to hear from her again. I didn't respond, but I didn't block her either. Daniel's still in prison. He'll be there for at least another 8 years. I don't think about him much anymore. When I do, it's not with anger. Just a kind of distant pity for a man who destroyed his own life chasing something he never really wanted. My mother emails occasionally. Updates about her health, about Lauren's progress, about mundane things happening in Chicago. I rarely respond, but I don't delete them. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have a conversation. Maybe I won't. I'm okay with not knowing yet. Meridian Forensic Consulting now has offices in London, Singapore, and Toronto. We employ 32 people. Last year, we were featured in Forbes. I was interviewed about building a business from scratch, about pivoting after setbacks, about resilience. I didn't mention Daniel or Lauren. I just talked about the work, about what it takes to uncover hidden truths and hold people accountable, about justice. James and I got engaged last month. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet Sunday morning in bed when he asked if I thought I might want to spend the rest of my life with him. I said yes before I'd even finished thinking about it. Progress, my therapist said. Learning to trust again. I still have nightmares sometimes. I wake up in that hospital bed, hearing their voices, feeling helpless. But James is always there. And the apartment we share in South Kensington doesn't feel haunted. It feels like home. I was thinking about all of this last week when I got an unexpected package. No return address, but postmarked from Chicago. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, probably 15 years old. Lauren and me at her high school graduation. We're both smiling, arms around each other, faces tilted toward the camera. I remember that day. I'd driven home from college to surprise her. We'd gone out for ice cream after the ceremony, talked about her plans for the future, laughed about stupid jokes only we understood. There was no note, no explanation, just the photo. I looked at it for a long time, at the 2 girls who had no idea what was coming, at the sister I'd loved, and the sister who'd betrayed me, and the complicated truth that sometimes both things could be real at the same time. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't frame it either. I put it in a box with Lauren's letter, closed the lid, and put it on a high shelf in my closet. Not forgotten, just filed away. Part of a history I'd survived but didn't need to carry anymore. The bottom line. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, turning in my own husband and sister, pressing charges, letting them go to prison. They say things like, but they're family, or everyone deserves a second chance, or don't you miss them? And the truth is no, I don't regret it. I don't miss them. Not the people they turned out to be. Because here's what I learned from all of this. Loyalty shouldn't mean accepting abuse. Love shouldn't require sacrificing yourself. Family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up when everything falls apart. Daniel and Lauren didn't just betray me. They revealed who they'd always been. People who saw me as an asset to exploit rather than a person to love. And when I refused to play that role anymore, When I chose myself over their comfort, they got exactly what they deserved. I didn't destroy my family. They did, by lying, stealing, and planning my death like it was a business opportunity. I just made sure there were consequences. I built a new life from the ashes of the old one. I found people who valued me for who I am, not what I could give them. I learned that starting over isn't admitting defeat. It's choosing yourself when no one else will. Would I change what happened if I could? Would I go back and somehow prevent the accident, the coma, the revelation that destroyed everything? Honestly, I don't know. Because that revelation also freed me. It showed me the truth. It gave me the chance to walk away from people who were slowly killing me in ways that had nothing to do with car accidents. I woke up from a coma and discovered my life was a lie. But I also woke up with a choice. Stay and let them bury me. Or leave and build something real. I chose myself. And 3 years later, standing in my London office, engaged to a man who knows my whole story and loves me anyway, running a company I built from nothing, I can honestly say it was the right choice. Sometimes the people who hurt you most do you the biggest favor. They show you exactly who they are. And then they give you permission to walk away. I'm not the same woman who woke up in that hospital. I'm stronger, harder in some ways, but also more certain about what I deserve and what I won't tolerate. Daniel and Lauren wanted me gone so they could take what I'd built. Instead, I left, and I took everything with me. Turns out, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building a life so good that the people who betrayed you become irrelevant. It's succeeding so thoroughly that their absence becomes a blessing rather than a loss. I used to think family meant everything. That blood was sacred. That loyalty was non-negotiable. Now I know better. Family is what you build. Loyalty is what you earn. And sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. I woke up from a coma, and I chose to stay awake.